Well, that's tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at weather going out for the next 8 to 10 days today. Looks like we've got some northern blocking coming back. There was signs of this the other day when I did the last 8 to 10 day video, I think on Tuesday. But GM was just suggesting that northern blocking could start re-emerging, and the models are sort of going with this idea now that we could start to get some high pressure setting up over North Pole. Now, I'm sure you know, if you've been watching these videos long enough, that northern blocking tends to be bad news for British Isles. In summer, it tends to keep it cool and very wet. It's one of the major reasons that we've had such appalling summers over the last few years up to this summer, when the absence of northern blocking meant that we could have a hotter and drier summer. And in winter, of course, we know very much from last winter, and particularly from March, it's the northern blocking that brings down the cold air out of the Arctic and sends it into the mid-latitudes, and that's what gives us the cold weather through the winter. Now, in September, northern blocking, I think, is basically going to mean it's going to be cool and pretty changeable, to be honest. Although if you can get a ridge of high pressure, it may be dry, but it'll be quite cold, and you could get some early sort of ground frost type conditions. But I think we're certainly looking at quite a coolish September now. Maybe a notably cold September could be developing with this northern blocking starting to appear. Before I get on with that, just talk about the advertising. There's green keyword ads on my pages at gazwebbiz.com. When you right cursor over green keywords, they display ads. But if you click through the word, you go to the advertised website and you're supporting gazwebbiz.com. When you do that, so starting off with the 500 millibar height anomaly charts, this is the mean flow at 500 millibars for the next 8 to 10 days, or going out to 8 to 10 days. And that's taking us more or less to around the 22nd or 23rd of September. We've got the ECMWF here on the left, the GFS is over on the right. 500 millibars is where we've got weather developing in the atmosphere, the high pressure, low pressure being moved around by the jet stream running above. What we're interested in is right over the pole, this big red area here on the ECMWF. That is an extensive blocking area of high pressure setting up over the Arctic in the next 8 to 10 days, and consequently we've got a ridge of, we've got a trough of low pressure setting up underneath it around central parts of Europe. Now we do still have this ridge of high pressure out in the Atlantic, so that's just about keeping the North Atlantic oscillation positive, but generally I think the idea is that we're trending further negative through the coming 8 to 10 day period into September. We're trending negative with the Arctic oscillation and the North Atlantic oscillation as well, and the reason that again is blocking area of high pressure developing over the northern latitudes. Now the GFS is very similar. It's not quite as extensive with the blocking area of high pressure, but nevertheless it does develop in up to the north of Scandinavia, between Scandinavia and Greenland, really. And it extends a ridge from that block down into the central part of the Atlantic. There's the trough sitting to the east and the southeast of the country. That's pretty cool and not bad unsettled perhaps, although this ridge here in the Atlantic is very tenuous and you could very easily break it down and send the jet stream through with a piece of energy. So I wouldn't take that ridge from the block to the high pressure in the Atlantic too seriously. But it's the same sort of idea between both poles, which is that high pressure is starting to develop and become quite extensive over the Arctic, and that at this time of year could mean that it gets quite cool and quite unsettled as well. Now, we are in for an unsettled spell coming up. It's going to be really wet, I think, as we go through Friday night into Saturday. I'll probably have a look at that in more detail tomorrow. These are the GFS temperature and rainfall ensembles. The red line here is where we should be at this time of year in the upper atmosphere. All members of the red line are going to go, all members of the ensemble I should say, are going to go a little bit above the red line in the next 24 hours. We're in quite a warmish sort of air mass, but it's associated with all these precipitation spikes down here at the bottom of the chart. So we're going to have a lot of rainfall coming up over the next day or two, particularly across central southern parts of England. But as we get through to the start of next week, then we're going to turn it really cool. Look at this, all members of the ensemble dipping down well below that red line. It is going to be turning cool, and it's going to stay cool through much of next week, staying really quite cool up to around the 21st, 22nd. Then we get a lot of scatter developing. Now, some members of the ensemble do go well above the red line, other members stay below the red line. and keep it quite cool. And of course, with that Arctic oscillation going increasingly negative, with the blocking re-emerging over the Arctic, you will probably tend to favour cooler conditions, to be honest. Now, the temperature anomalies for the next week, this takes us from Thursday the 12th to Thursday the 19th of September. Look at this, it's going to be quite a cold week coming up. Temperature anomalies coming out anything from around 2 to 4 degrees below average. Very cool as well for many central parts of Europe, France, Germany, into central and eastern parts of Europe, even on the cool side. You really have to go up to Scandinavia and down to Spain and Portugal and over towards Greece to find the temperature anomalies above average. Much of the continent, Britain included, is going to have a cool week coming up. The precipitation anomalies for the coming week show that we're going to have near normal or above average rainfall, particularly focused across central and eastern parts of England, and that really, and the southeast of England, that really is associated with the rainfall from Friday night into Saturday morning. I'll do more about this tomorrow, but it does look really wet down in the southeast and across southern counties from Friday night into Saturday. So just have a look at the charts very quickly. This is a chart from the GFS model for Monday. Got a deep storm system to the north of Scotland. The first Atlantic gale will be blowing across the country Sunday into Monday in a very cool northwesterly wind with that as well. As we run through to Tuesday, we're bringing another area of low pressure in off the Atlantic. We're taking more heavy rain in across the country through Tuesday. That's sitting in the North Sea on Wednesday. And look at this, we've got like low pressures dumbbelling around to the north and the east of the country. Very tight baptised bars, really windy, and the winds are coming from the north or northwest direction, so it will be cool. Notice that ridge beginning to extend up towards Greenland through the Atlantic, and look at the blocking that's going on to the north of Scandinavia, stretching back in towards central parts of Russia. That is the blocking high pressure beginning to develop in the Arctic. As we move as we move through into Thursday the 19th and on into Friday the 20th, where we're keeping it unsettled. We have got blocking here now developing. There's a ridge being thrown from that high pressure to the north of Scandinavia out towards Greenland. We're used to seeing this back last winter, or we was used to seeing it. Haven't seen it much through the summer, but the models for GFS certainly is beginning to get that idea going again. That high pressure is starting to block in the northern latitude. Now we've still got this ridge of high pressure sitting to the southwest of the country, and we've still got low pressure coming through as well, so we're still bringing low pressure through, and this high pressure round the south to the west of Portugal, I should say, is just enough to just keep an Atlantic influence going. So we're not into a proper negative North Atlantic oscillation situation yet, but the blocking is definitely re-emerging to the north of the country. Now we do try to extend the ridge in by day 10, Sunday the 22nd of September. Does that last? Well, no, it doesn't, not on this particular run of the GFS model anyway. We bring another low pressure system through to Monday the 23rd of September. So you get the idea from this that we could be looking at a very unsettled and cool September coming up now. The ECMWF, very similar from the start of next week, that deep area of low pressure to North Scotland bring down this northwesterly gale. As we run through next week, we keep it very unsettled with low pressure out to the east and the north of the country. Again, there's the blocking trying to re-emerge across Greenland and stretching back to the north of Scandinavia. So we're on the cool side of the blocking and it's quite unsettled. This area of high pressure in the Atlantic is trying to bring milder air in off the Atlantic and keep the North Atlantic oscillation positive, but generally the idea, I think, is that this high pressure to the north of Scandinavia is increasingly taking over the pattern. As we get through to day 10, which as far as the ECMWF goes, we're sort of in a three-way split with the blocking over the Arctic, the low pressure around Iceland, and the high pressure to the south. A real mess that chart is, but the general direction of this is that the blocking is re-emerging over the Arctic. Finally, have a look at the gem, and it's same idea with the low pressure to North Scotland. At start next week will be very wet and windy. At start next week, more low pressure comes through up to Wednesday, and then we try to extend this ridge of high pressure in. Actually, the GEM is the best for bringing in high pressure off the Atlantic. Next week, we have got the blocking to the north of Scandinavia, but it's really the high pressure extending off the Atlantic and low pressure around Iceland keeping winds westerly that's dominating this. So as we get through to the 21st and the 22nd of September, nice ridge of high pressure building through there on the Canadian model that would be generally dry and quite warm. actually. The Canadian model is quite warm this morning, though by night it will be cold, but definitely the Canadian model is the best in terms of warmer, drier conditions. But I think there's got to be some doubt about this with this blocking coming back over the Arctic. I've got some doubts about extending this ridge of high pressure in off the Atlantic. If the blocking starts to force the issue over the pole, we could be looking at some really unsettled weather, or a continuation of really unsettled weather, and turning increasingly cool as well. So big question marks about this September now. Could be turning into a notably cool and unsettled month. We've got to keep an eye on that northern blocking. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.